My story won't be like hers, of course. I have been born to less exciting times. I shall hope to make terms with my husband Arthur, and with his odd, loud father, and with his sweet little braggart brother. I shall hope that his mother and his grandmother will love me, or at the very least teach me how to be a Princess of Wales, a Queen of England. I shall not have to ride in desperate dashes by night from one besieged fortress to another, as my mother did. I shall not have to pawn my own jewels to pay mercenary soldiers, as she did. I shall not have to ride out in my own armour to rally my troops. I shall not be threatened by the wicked French on one side and the heretic Moors on the other, as my mother was. I shall marry Arthur, and when his father dies, which must be soon, for he is so very old and so very bad-tempered, then we shall be King and Queen of England, and my mother will rule in Spain as I rule in England, and she will see me keep England in alliance with Spain as I have promised her. She will see me hold my country in an unbreakable treaty with hers. She will see. I shall be safe forever. London, 14th of November, 1501. On the morning of her wedding day, Catalina was called early, but she had been awake for hours, stirring as soon as the cold, wintry sun had started to light the pale sky. They had prepared a great bath. Her ladies told her that the English were amazed that she was going to wash before her wedding day, and that most of them thought that she was risking her life. Catalina, brought up in the Alhambra, where the bath-houses were the most beautiful suite of rooms in the palace, centres of gossip, laughter, and scented water, was equally amazed to hear that the English thought it perfectly adequate to bathe only occasionally, and that the poor people would bathe only once a year. She had already realized that the scent of musk and ambergris, which had wafted in with the king and Prince Arthur, had underlying notes of sweat and horse, and that she would live for the rest of her life among people who did not change their underwear from one year to the next. She had seen it as another thing that she must learn to endure, as an angel from heaven endures the privations of earth. She had come from Aliana, the garden, the paradise, to the ordinary world. She had come from the Alhambra Palace to England. She had anticipated some disagreeable changes. "I suppose it is always so cold that it does not matter," she said uncertainly to Donna Elvira. "It matters to us," the duenna said, "and you shall bathe like an Infanta of Spain, though all the cooks in the kitchen have had to stop what they are doing to boil up water." Donna Elvira had commanded a great tureen from the flesh kitchen, which was usually deployed to scald beast carcasses, had it scoured by 3 scullions, lined it with linen sheets, and filled it to the brim with hot water scattered with rose petals and scented with oil of roses brought from Spain. She lovingly supervised the washing of Catalina's long white limbs, the manicuring of her toes, the filing of her fingernails, the brushing of her teeth, and finally the 3-rinse washing of her hair. Time after time, the incredulous English maids toiled to the door to receive another ewer of hot water from exhausted page-boys, and tipped it in the tub to keep the temperature of the bath hot. "If only we had a proper bath-house," Donna Elvira mourned, "with steam, and a tepidarium, and a proper clean marble floor, hot water on tap, and somewhere for you to sit and be properly scrubbed." "Don't fuss," Catalina said dreamily, as they helped her from the bath and patted her all over with scented towels. One maid took her hair, squeezed out the water, and rubbed it gently with red silk soaked in oil to give it shine and colour. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Donna Elvira said, as they led the Infanta towards her wardrobe and started to dress her, in layer after layer of shifts and gowns. "Pull that lace tighter, girl, so that the skirt lies flat. This is her day as well as yours, Catalina. She said that you would marry him, whatever it cost her." "Yes, but she did not pay the greatest price. I know they bought me this wedding with a king's ransom for my dowry, and I know that they endured long and hard negotiations, and I survived the worst voyage anyone has ever taken. But there was another price paid that we never speak of, wasn't there? And the thought of that price is in my mind today, as it has been on the journey, as it was on the voyage, as it has been ever since I first heard of it. There was a man of only 24 years old, Edward Plantagenet, the Duke of Warwick, and a son of the kings of England. with, truth be told, a better claim to the throne of England than that of my father-in-law. He was a prince, nephew to the king, and of blood royal. He committed no crime, he did nothing wrong, but he was arrested for my sake, taken to the Tower for my benefit, and finally killed, beheaded on the block for my gain, so that my parents could be satisfied that there were no pretenders to the throne that they had bought for me. My father himself told King Henry himself that he would not send me to England while the Duke of Warwick was alive, and so I am like Death himself, carrying the scythe. When they ordered the ship for me to come to England, Warwick was a dead man. They say he was a simpleton. He did not really understand that he was under arrest. He thought that he was housed in the Tower as a way of giving him honour. He knew he was the last of the Plantagenet princes, and he knew that the Tower had always been royal lodgings as well as a prison. When they put a pretender, a cunning man who had tried to pass himself off as a royal prince, into the room next door to poor Warwick, he thought it was for company. When the other man invited him to escape, he thought it was a clever thing to do, and like the innocent he was, he whispered of their plans where his guards could hear. That gave them the excuse they needed for a charge of treason. They trapped him very easily. They beheaded him with little protest from anyone. The country wants peace and the security of an unchallenged king. The country will wink at a dead claimant or two. I am expected to wink at it also, especially as it was done for my benefit. It was done at my father's request for me, to make my way smooth. When they told me that he was dead, I said nothing, for I am an infanta of Spain. Before anything else, I am my mother's daughter. I do not weep like a girl and tell all the world my every thought. But when I was alone in the gardens of the Alhambra, in the evening with the sun going down, and leaving the world cool and sweet, I walked beside a long canal of still water, hidden by the trees, and I thought that I would never walk in the shade of trees again, and enjoy the flicker of hot sunshine through cool green leaves, without thinking that Edward, Duke of Warwick, will see the sun no more, so that I might live my life in wealth and luxury. I prayed then that I might be forgiven for the death of an innocent man. My mother and father have fought down the length of Castile and Aragon, have ridden the breadth of Spain to make justice run in every village, in the smallest of hamlets, so that no Spaniard can lose his life on the whim of another. Even the great lords cannot murder a peasant, they have to be ruled by the law. But when it came to England and to me, they forgot this. They forgot that we live in a palace where the walls are engraved with the promise, "Enter and ask, do not be afraid to seek justice, for here you will find it." They just wrote to King Henry and said that they would not send me until Warwick was dead, and in a moment, at their expressed wish, Warwick was killed. And sometimes, when I do not remember to be Infanta of Spain, nor Princess of Wales, but just the Catalina who walked behind her mother through the great gate into the Alhambra Palace, and knew that her mother was the greatest power the world had ever known. Sometimes I wonder childishly if my mother has not made a great mistake, if she has not driven God's will too far, farther even than God would want. For this wedding is launched in blood, and sails in a sea of innocent blood. How can such a wedding ever be the start of a good marriage? Must it not, as night follows sunset, be tragic and bloody too? How can any happiness ever come to Prince Arthur and to me, that has been bought at such a terrible price? And if we could be happy, would it not be an utterly, sinfully selfish joy?
Prince Harry, the 10-year-old Duke of York, was so proud of his white taffeta suit that he scarcely glanced at Catalina until they were at the west doors of St. Paul's Cathedral, and then he turned and stared, trying to see her face through the exquisite lace of the white mantilla. Ahead of them stretched a raised pathway, lined with red cloth, studded with golden nails, running at head height from the great doorway of the church, where the citizens of London crowded to get a better view, up the long aisle to the altar, where Prince Arthur stood, pale with nerves, 600 slow ceremonial paces away. Catalina smiled at the young boy at her side, and he beamed with delight. Her hand was steady on his proffered arm. He paused for a moment more, until everyone in the enormous church realized that the bride and prince were at the doorway, waiting to make their entrance. A hush fell. Everyone craned to see the bride, and then, at the precise, most theatrical moment, he led her forwards. Catalina felt the congregation murmur around her feet as she went past them, high on the stage that King Henry had ordered to be built, so that everyone should see the flower of Spain meet the rosebush of England. The prince turned as she came towards him, but was blinded for a moment by irritation at the sight of his brother leading the princess as if he himself were the bridegroom, glancing around as he walked, acknowledging the doffing of caps and the whispering of curtsies with his smug little smile, as if it were him that everyone had come to see. Then they were both at Arthur's side, and Harry had to step back, however reluctantly, as the princess and prince faced the archbishop together and kneeled together on the specially embroidered white taffeta cushions. "Never has a couple been more married," King Henry thought sourly, standing in the royal pew with his wife and his mother. "Her parents trusted me no further than they would a snake, and my view of her father has always been that of a half-Moor huckster. 9 times they have been betrothed. This will be a marriage that nothing can break. Her father cannot wriggle from it, whatever second thoughts he has. He will protect me against France now. This is his daughter's inheritance. The very thought of our alliance will frighten the French into peace with me, and we must have peace." He glanced at his wife at his side. Her eyes were filled with tears, watching her son and his bride as the archbishop raised their clasped hands and wrapped them in his holy stole. Her face, beautiful with emotion, did not stir him. Whoever knew what she was thinking behind that lovely mask? Of her own marriage, the union of York and Lancaster, which put her as a wife on the throne that she could have claimed in her own right? Or was she thinking of the man she would have preferred as a husband? The king scowled. He was never sure of his wife Elizabeth. In general, he preferred not to consider her. Beyond her, his flint-faced mother, Margaret Beaufort, watched the young couple with a glimmer of a smile. This was England's triumph. This was her son's triumph, but far more than that, this was her triumph. To have dragged this base-born bastard family back from disaster, to challenge the power of York, to defeat a reigning king, to capture the very throne of England against all the odds. This was her making. It was her plan to bring her son back from France at the right moment to claim his throne. They were her alliances who gave him the soldiers for the battle. It was her battle plan which left the usurper Richard to despair on the field at Bosworth. And it was her victory that she celebrated every day of her life. And this was the marriage that was the culmination of that long struggle. This bride would give her a grandson, a Spanish Tudor king for England, and a son after him, and so lay down a dynasty of Tudors that would be never-ending. Catalina repeated the words of the marriage vow, felt the weight of a cold ring on her finger, turned her face to her new husband, and felt his cool kiss in a daze. When she walked back down that absurd walkway, and saw the smiling faces stretching from her feet to the walls of the cathedral, she started to realize that it was done. And when they went from the cool dark of the cathedral to the bright wintry sunlight outside, and heard the roar of the crowd for Arthur and his bride, the Prince and Princess of Wales, she realized that she had done her duty, finally and completely. She had been promised to Arthur from childhood, and now at last they were married. She had been named the Princess of Wales since she was 3 years old, and now, at last, she had taken her name and taken her place in the world. She looked up and smiled, and the crowd, delighted with the free wine, with the prettiness of the young girl, with the promise of safety from civil war that could only come with a settled royal succession, roared their approval. They were husband and wife, but they did not speak more than a few words to each other for the rest of the long day. There was a formal banquet, and though they were seated side by side, there were healths to be drunk and speeches to be attended to, and musicians playing. After the long dinner of many courses, there was an entertainment with poetry and singers, and a tableau. No one had ever seen so much money flung at a single occasion. It was a greater celebration than the king's own wedding, greater even than his own coronation. It was a redefinition of the English kingly state, and it told the world that this marriage of the Tudor Rose to the Spanish princess was one of the greatest events of the new age. 2 new dynasties were proclaiming themselves by this union, Ferdinand and Isabella of the new country that they were forging from Al-Andalus, and the Tudors who were making England their own. The musicians played a dance from Spain, and Queen Elizabeth, at a nod from her mother-in-law, leaned over and said quietly to Catalina, "It would be a great pleasure for us all if you would dance." Catalina, quite composed, rose from her chair and went to the centre of the great hall as her ladies gathered around her, formed a circle, and held hands. They danced the pavan, the same dance that Henry had seen at Dogmersfield, and he watched his daughter-in-law through narrowed eyes. Undoubtedly she was the most beddable young woman in the room. A pity that a cold fish like Arthur would be certain to fail to teach her the pleasures that could be had between sheets. If he let them both go to Ludlow Castle, she would either die of boredom or slip into complete frigidity. On the other hand, if he kept her at his side, she would delight his eyes. He could watch her dance. He could watch her brighten the court. He sighed. He thought he did not dare. "She is delightful," the Queen remarked. "Let's hope so," he said sourly. "My lord?" He smiled at her look of surprised inquiry. "No, nothing, you're right. Delightful indeed. And she looks healthy, doesn't she, as far as you can tell?" "I am sure she is, and her mother assured me that she is most regular in her habits." He nodded. "That woman would say anything." "But surely not. Nothing that would mislead us. Not on a matter of such importance," she suggested. He nodded and let it go. The sweetness of his wife's nature and her faith in others was not something he could change. Since she had no influence on policy, her opinions did not matter. "And Arthur?" he said. "He seems to be growing and strong. I would to God he had the spirits of his brother." They both looked at young Harry, who was standing, watching the dancers, his face flushed with excitement, his eyes bright. "Oh, Harry," his mother said indulgently, "but there has never been a prince more handsome and more full of fun than Harry." The Spanish dance ended, and the king clapped his hands. "Now Harry and his sister," he commanded. He did not want to force Arthur to dance in front of his new bride. The boy danced like a clerk, all gangling legs and concentration. But Harry was raring to go, and was on the floor with his sister Princess Margaret in a moment. The musicians knew the young royal's taste in music, and struck up a lively galliard. Harry tossed his jacket to one side, and threw himself into the dance, stripped down to his shirt-sleeves like a peasant. There was a gasp from the Spanish grandees at the young prince's shocking behaviour, but the English court smiled with his parents at his energy and enthusiasm. When the two had romped their way through the final turns and gallop, everyone applauded, laughing. Everyone but Prince Arthur, who was staring into the middle distance, determined not to watch his brother dance. He came to with a start only when his mother put her hand on his arm. "Please God, he's daydreaming of his wedding night," his father remarked to Lady Margaret, his mother, "though I doubt it." She gave a sharp laugh. "I can't say I think much of the bride," she said critically. "You don't?" he asked. "You saw the treaty yourself." "I like the price, but the goods are not to my taste," she said with her usual sharp wit. "She's a slight, pretty thing, isn't she?" "Would you rather a strapping milkmaid?" "I'd like a girl with the hips to give us sons," she said bluntly. "A nursery full of sons." "She looks well enough to me," he ruled. He knew that he would never be able to say how well she looked to him. Even to himself he should never even think it. Catalina was put into her wedding bed by her ladies. Maria de Salinas kissed her good night, and Donna Elvira gave her a mother's blessing. But Arthur had to undergo a further round of backslapping ribaldry before his friends and companions escorted him to her door. They put him into bed beside the princess, who lay still and silent as the strange men laughed and bade them good night, and then the archbishop came to sprinkle the sheets with holy water and pray over the young couple. It could not have been a more public bedding unless they had opened the doors for the citizens of London to see the young people side by side, awkward as bolsters, in their marital bed. It seemed like hours to both of them until the doors were finally closed on the smiling, curious faces, and the two of them were quite alone, seated upright against the pillows, frozen like a pair of shy dolls. There was silence. "Would you like a glass of ale?" Arthur suggested, in a voice thin with nerves. "I don't like ale very much," Catalina said. "This is different. They call it wedding ale. It's sweetened with mead and spices. It's for courage." "Do we need courage?" He was emboldened by her smile, and got out of bed to fetch her a cup. "I should think we do," he said. "You are a stranger in a new land, and I have never known any girls but my sisters. We both have much to learn." She took the cup of hot ale from him and sipped the heady drink. "Oh, that is nice." Arthur gulped down a cup and took another. Then he came back to the bed. Raising the cover and getting in beside her seemed an imposition. The idea of pulling up her night shift and mounting her was utterly beyond him. "I shall blow out the candle," he announced. The sudden dark engulfed them. Only the embers of the fire glowed red. "Are you very tired?" he asked, longing for her to say that she was too tired to do her duty. "Not at all," she said politely, her disembodied voice coming out of the darkness. "Are you?" "No." "Do you want to sleep now?" he asked. "I know what we have to do," she said abruptly. "All my sisters have been married. I know all about it." "I know as well," he said, stung. "I didn't mean that you don't know. I meant that you need not be afraid to start. I know what we have to do." "I am not afraid. It is just that I—" To his absolute horror, he felt her hand pull his nightshirt upwards and touch the bare skin of his belly. "I did not want to frighten you," he said, his voice unsteady, desire rising up even though he was sick with fear that he would be incompetent. "I am not afraid," said Isabella's daughter. "I have never been afraid of anything." In the silence and the darkness, he felt her take hold of him and grasp firmly. At her touch he felt his desire well up so sharply that he was afraid he would come in her hand. With a low groan he rolled over on top of her and found she had stripped herself naked to the waist, her nightgown pulled up. He fumbled clumsily and felt her flinch as he pushed against her. The whole process seemed quite impossible. There was no way of knowing what a man was supposed to do, nothing to help or guide him, not knowing the mysterious geography of her body. And then she gave a little cry of pain, stifled with her hand, and he knew he had done it. The relief was so great that he came at once, a half-painful, half-pleasurable rush, which told him that whatever his father thought of him, whatever his brother Harry thought of him, the job was done, and he was a man and a husband. And the princess was his wife, and no longer a virgin untouched. Catalina waited till he was asleep, and then she got up and washed herself in her privy chamber. She was bleeding, but she knew it would stop soon. The pain was no worse than she had expected. Isabel, her sister, had said it was not as bad as falling from a horse, and she had been right. Margot, her sister-in-law, had said that it was paradise, but Catalina could not imagine how such deep embarrassment and discomfort could add up to bliss, and concluded that Margot was exaggerating, as she often did. Catalina came back to the bedroom, but she did not go back to the bed. Instead, she sat on the floor by the fire, hugging her knees and watching the embers. "Not a bad day," I say to myself, and I smile. It is my mother's phrase. I want to hear her voice so much that I am saying her words to myself. Often, when I was little more than a baby, and she had spent a long day in the saddle, inspecting the forward scouting parties, riding back to chivvy up the slower train, she would come into her tent, kick off her riding boots, drop down to the rich Moorish rugs and cushions by the fire in the brass brazier, and say, "Not a bad day." "Is there ever a bad day?" I once asked her. "Not when you are doing God's work," she replied seriously. "There are days when it is easy and days when it is hard. But if you are on God's work, then there are never bad days." I don't for a moment doubt that bedding Arthur, even my brazen touching him and drawing him into me, is God's work. It is God's work that there should be an unbreakable alliance between Spain and England. Only with England as a reliable ally can Spain challenge the spread of France. Only with English wealth, and especially English ships, can we Spanish take the war against wickedness to the very heart of the Moorish empires in Africa and Turkey. The Italian princes are a muddle of rival ambitions. The French are a danger to every neighbour. It has to be England who joins the crusade with Spain to maintain the defence of Christendom against the terrifying might of the Moors. Whether they be black Moors from Africa, the bogeymen of my childhood, or light-skinned Moors from the dreadful Ottoman Empire. And once they are defeated, then the Crusaders must go on to India, to the east, as far as they have to go to challenge and defeat the wickedness that is the religion of the Moors. My great fear is that the Saracen kingdoms stretch forever to the end of the world, and even Cristobal Colon does not know where that is. "What if there is no end to them?" I once asked my mother, as we leaned over the sun-warmed walls of the fort and watched the dispatch of a new group of Moors leaving the city of Granada, their baggage loaded on mules, the women weeping, the men with their heads bowed low. The flag of St. James now flying over the red fort, where the crescent had rippled for 7 centuries, the bells ringing for Mass, where once horns had blown for heretic prayers. What if now we have defeated these, they just go back to Africa, and in another year they come again? "That is why you have to be brave, my Princess of Wales," my mother had answered. "That is why you have to be ready to fight them whenever they come, wherever they come. This is war till the end of the world, till the end of time, when God finally ends it. It will take many shapes, it will never cease. They will come again and again, and you will have to be ready in Wales as we will be ready in Spain. I bore you to be a fighting princess, as I am a queen militant. Your father and I placed you in England, as Maria is placed in Portugal, as Juana is placed with the Habsburgs in the Netherlands. You are there to defend the lands of your husbands and to hold them in alliance with us. It is your task to make England ready and keep it safe. Make sure that you never fail your country, as your sisters must never fail theirs, as I have never failed mine." Catalina was awakened in the early hours of the morning by Arthur gently pushing between her legs. Resentfully she let him know as he wanted, knowing that this was the way to get a son and make the alliance secure. Some princesses, like her mother, had to fight their way in open warfare to secure their kingdom. Most princesses, like her, had to endure painful ordeals in private. It did not take long, and then he fell asleep. Catalina lay as still as a frozen stone in order not to wake him again. He did not stir until daybreak, when his grooms of the bedchamber rapped brightly on the door. He rose up with a slightly embarrassed "Good morning" to her, and went out. They greeted him with cheers and marched him in triumph to his own rooms. Catalina heard him say, vulgarly, boastfully, "Gentlemen, this night I have been in Spain," and heard the yell of laughter that applauded his joke. Her ladies came in with her gown and heard the men's laughter. Donna Elvira raised her thin eyebrows to heaven at the manners of these English. "I don't know what your mother would say," Donna Elvira remarked. "She would say that words count less than God's will, and God's will has been done," Catalina said firmly. It was not like this for my mother. She fell in love with my father on sight, and she married him with great joy. When I grew older, I began to understand that they felt a real desire for each other. It was not just a powerful partnership of a great king and queen. My father might take other women as his lovers, but he needed his wife. He could not be happy without her. And my mother could not even see another man. She was blind to anybody but my father. Alone, of all the courts in Europe, the court of Spain had no tradition of love play, of flirtation, of adoration of the queen in the practice of courtly love. It would have been a waste of time. My mother simply did not notice other men, and when they sighed for her and said her eyes were as blue as the skies, she simply laughed and said, "What nonsense!" And that was an end to it. When my parents had to be apart, they wrote every day. He would not move one step without telling her of it and asking for her advice. When he was in danger, she hardly slept. He could not have got through the Sierra Nevada if she had not been sending him men and digging teams to level the road for him. No one else could have driven a road through there. He would have trusted no one else to support him, to hold the kingdom together as he pushed forwards. She could have conquered the mountains for no one else. He was the only one that could have attracted her support. What looked like a remarkable unity of two calculating players was deceptive. It was their passion which they played out on the political stage. She was a great queen, because that was how she could evoke his desire. He was a great general in order to match her. It was their love, their lust, which drove them, almost as much as God. We are a passionate family. When Isabel, my sister, now with God, came back from Portugal a widow, she swore that she had loved her husband so much that she would never take another. She had been with him for only 6 months, but she said that without him life had no meaning. Juana, my second sister, is so in love with her husband Philip that she cannot bear to let him out of her sight. When she learns that he is interested in another woman, she swears that she will poison her rival. She is quite mad with love for him. And my brother, my darling brother Juan, simply died of love. He and his beautiful wife Margot were so passionate, so besotted with each other, that his health failed, and he was dead within 6 months of their wedding. Is there anything more tragic than a young man dying 6 months into his marriage? I come from passionate stock. But what about me? Shall I ever fall in love? Not with this clumsy boy, for a certainty. My early liking for him has quite melted away. He is too shy to speak to me. He mumbles and pretends he cannot think of the words. He forced me to command in the bedroom, and I am ashamed that I had to be the one to make the first move. He makes me into a woman without shame, a woman of the marketplace, when I want to be wooed like a lady in a romance. But if I had not invited him, what could he have done? I feel a fool now, and I blame him for my embarrassment. In Spain, indeed. He would have got no closer than the Indies if I had not shown him how to do it. Stupid puppy. When I first saw him, I thought he was as beautiful as a knight from the romances, like a troubadour, like a poet. I thought I could be like a lady in a tower, and he could sing beneath my window and persuade me to love him. But although he has the looks of a poet, he doesn't have the wit. I can never get more than 2 words out of him, and I begin to feel that I demean myself in trying to please him. Of course, I will never forget that it is my duty to endure this youth, this Arthur. My hope is always for a child, and my destiny is to keep England safe against the Moors. I shall do that. Whatever else happens, I shall be Queen of England and protect my 2 countries, the Spain of my birth and the England of my marriage.
End of CD 2. CD 3.
London, winter 1501. Arthur and Catalina, standing stiffly side by side on the royal barge, but not exchanging so much as one word, led a great fleet of gaily painted barges downriver to Baynard's castle, which would be their London home for the next weeks. It was a huge rectangular palace of a house overlooking the river, with gardens running down to the water's edge. The Mayor of London, the councillors, and all the court followed the royal barge, and musicians played as the heirs to the throne took up residence in the heart of the city. Catalina noticed that the Scots envoys were much in attendance, negotiating the marriage of her new sister-in-law, Princess Margaret. King Henry was using his children as pawns in his game for power, as every king must do. Arthur had made the vital link with Spain. Margaret, though only 12 years old, would make Scotland into a friend, rather than the enemy it had been for generations. Princess Mary also would be married when her time came, either to the greatest enemy that the country faced, or the greatest friend that they hoped to keep. Catalina was glad that she had known from childhood that she should be the next Queen of England. There had been no changes of policy and no shifting alliances. She had been Queen of England to be, almost from birth. It made the separation from her home and from her family so much easier. She noticed that Arthur was very restrained in his greeting when he met the Scots lords at dinner at the Palace of Westminster. "The Scots are our most dangerous enemies," Edward Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham, told Catalina in whispered Castilian, as they stood at the back of the hall waiting for the company to take their seats. "The King and the Prince hope that this marriage will make them our friend forever, will bind the Scots to us. But it is hard for any of us to forget how they have constantly harried us. We have all been brought up to know that we have a most constant and malignant enemy to the north." "Surely they are only a poor little kingdom," she queried. "What harm can they do us?" "They always ally with France," he told her. "Every time we have a war with France, they make an alliance and pour over our northern borders. And they may be small and poor, but they are the doorway for the terrible danger of France to invade us from the north. I think your Grace knows from your childhood that even a small country on your frontier can be a danger." "Well, the Moors had only a small country at the end," she observed. "My father always said that the Moors were like a disease. They might be a small irritation, but they were always there." "The Scots are our plague," he agreed. "Once every 3 years or so they invade and make a little war, and we lose an acre of land or win it back again. And every summer they harry the border countries and steal what they cannot grow or make themselves. No northern farmer has ever been safe from them. The king is determined to have peace." "Will they be kind to the Princess Margaret?" "In their own rough way." He smiled. "Not as you have been welcomed, Infanta." Catalina beamed in return. She knew she was warmly welcomed in England. Londoners had taken the Spanish princess to their hearts. They liked the gaudy glamour of her train, the oddness of her dress, and they liked the way the princess always had a smile for a waiting crowd. Catalina had learned from her mother that the people are a greater power than an army of mercenaries, and she never turned her head away from a cheer. She always waved, she always smiled, and if they raised a great bellow of applause, she would even bob them a pretty little curtsy. She glanced over to where Princess Margaret, a vain, precocious girl, was smoothing down her dress and pushing back her headdress before going into the hall. "Soon you will be married and going away, as I have done," Catalina remarked pleasantly in French. "I do hope it brings you happiness." The younger girl looked at her boldly. "Not as you have done, for you have come to the finest kingdom in Europe, whereas I have to go far away into exile," she said. "England may be fine to you, but it is still strange to me," Catalina said, trying not to flare up at the rudeness of the girl. "And if you had seen my home in Spain, you would be surprised at how fine our palace is there." "There is nowhere better than England," Margaret said, with the serene conviction of one of the spoiled Tudor children. "But it will be good to be queen. While you are still only a princess, I shall be queen. I shall be the equal of my mother." She thought for a moment. "Indeed, I shall be the equal of your mother." The colour rushed into Catalina's face. "You would never be the equal of my mother," she snapped. "You are a fool to even say it." Margaret gasped. Now, your Royal Highnesses," the Duke interrupted quickly. Your father is ready to take his place. Will you please to follow him into the hall?" Margaret turned and flounced away from Catalina. "She is very young," the Duke said soothingly, "and although she would never admit it, she is afraid to leave her mother and her father and go so far away." "She has a lot to learn," Catalina said through gritted teeth. "She should learn the manners of a queen if she is going to be one." She turned to find Arthur at her side, ready to conduct her into the hall behind his parents. The royal family took their seats. The king and his 2 sons sat at the high table under the canopy of state, facing out over the hall. To their right sat the Queen and the princesses. My lady the king's mother, Margaret Beaufort, was seated beside the king, between him and his wife. "Margaret and Catalina were having cross words as they came in," she observed to him with grim satisfaction. "I thought that the Infanta would irritate our Princess Margaret. She cannot bear to have too much attention shown to another, and everyone makes such a fuss over Catalina." "Margaret will soon be gone," Henry said shortly. "Then she can have her own court and her own honeymoon." "Catalina has become the very centre of the court," his mother complained. "The palace is crowded out with people coming to watch her dine. Everyone wants to see her." "She's a novelty only, a 7-day wonder, and anyway I want people to see her." "She has charm of a sort," the older woman noted. The groom of the ewer presented a golden bowl filled with scented water, and Lady Margaret dipped her fingertips, and then wiped them on the napkin. "I think her very pleasing," Henry said as he dried his own hands. "She went through the wedding without one wrong step, and the people like her." His mother made a small, dismissive gesture. "She is sick with her own vanity. She has not been brought up as I would bring up a child of mine. Her will has not been broken to obedience. She thinks she is something special." Henry glanced across at the princess. She had bent her head to listen to something being said by the youngest Tudor princess, Princess Mary, and he saw her smile and reply. "Do you know, I think she is something special," he said. The celebrations continued for days and days, and then the court moved on to the new-built, glamorous palace of Richmond, set in a great and beautiful park. To Catalina, in a swirl of strange faces and introductions, it felt as if one wonderful joust and fete merged into another, with herself at the very centre of it all, a queen as celebrated as any sultana, with a country devoted to her amusement. But after a week the party was concluded, with the king coming to the princess and telling her that it was time for her Spanish companions to go home. Catalina had always known that the little court which had accompanied her through storms and near shipwreck to present her to her new husband would leave her once the wedding was done and the first half of the dowry paid. But it was a gloomy couple of days while they packed their bags and said good-bye to the princess. She would be left with her small domestic household, her ladies, her chamberlain, her treasurer, and her immediate servants. But the rest of her entourage must leave. Even knowing as she did that this was the way of the world, that the wedding party always left after the wedding, did not make her feel any less bereft. She sent them with messages to everyone in Spain, and with a letter for her mother. From her daughter, Catalina, Princess of Wales, to Her Royal Highness of Castile and Aragon, and most dearest Madre. O Madre, as these ladies and gentlemen will tell you, the Prince and I have a good house near the river. It is called Baynard's Castle, although it is not a castle, but a palace, and newly built. There are no bath-houses for either ladies or men. I know what you're thinking. You cannot imagine it. Donna Elvira has had the blacksmith make a great cauldron, which they heat up on the fire in the kitchen, and 6 serving men heave it to my room for my bath. Also, there are no pleasure gardens with flowers, no streams, no fountains. It is quite extraordinary. It all looks as if it is not yet built. At best they have a tiny court, which they call a knot garden, where you can walk round and round until you are dizzy. The food is not good, and the wine very sour. They eat nothing but preserved fruit, and I believe they have never heard of vegetables. You must not think that I am complaining. I wanted you to know that even with these small difficulties, I am content to be the princess. Prince Arthur is kind and considerate to me when we meet, which is generally at dinner. He has given me a very beautiful mare of Barbary stock mixed with English, and I ride her every day. The gentlemen of the court joust, but not the princes. My champion is often the Duke of Buckingham, who is very kind to me. He advises me as to the court, and tells me how to go on. We all often dine, in the English style, men and women together. The women have their own rooms, but men visitors and male servants come and go out of them as if they were public. There is no seclusion for women at all. The only place I can be sure to be alone is if I lock myself in the necessary house. Otherwise there are people everywhere. Queen Elizabeth, though very quiet, is very kind to me when we meet, and I like being in her company. My lady the King's mother is very cold, but I think she is like that with everyone except the King and the princes. She dotes on her son and grandsons. She rules the court as if she were queen herself. She is very devout and very serious. I am sure she is very admirable in every way. You will want to know if I am with child. There are no signs yet. You will want to know that I read my Bible or holy books for 2 hours every day as you ordered, and that I go to Mass 3 times a day, and I take communion every Sunday also. Father Alessandro Geraldini is well, and as great a spiritual guide and adviser in England as he was in Spain, and I trust to him and to God to keep me strong in the faith to do God's work in England as you do in Spain. Donna Elvira keeps my ladies in good order, and I obey her as I would you. Maria de Salinas is my best friend, here as at home, though nothing here is like Spain, and I cannot bear her to talk of home at all. I will be the princess that you want me to be. I shall not fail you or God. I will be queen, and I will defend England against the Moors. Please write to me soon, and tell me how you are. You seemed so sad and low when I left. I hope that you are better now. I am sure that the darkness that you saw in your mother will pass over you, and not rest on your life as it did on hers. Surely God would not inflict sadness on you, who has always been his favourite. I pray for you and for Father every day. I hear your voice in my head, advising me all the time. Please write soon to your daughter who loves you so much, Catalina. P.S. Although I am glad to be married, and to be called to do my duty for Spain and God, I miss you very much. I know you are a queen before a mother, but I would be so glad to have one letter from you. C. The court bade a cheerful farewell to the Spanish, but Catalina found it hard to smile and wave. After they had gone, she went down to the river to see the last of the barges shrink and then disappear in the distance. And King Henry found her there, a lonely figure, on the pier looking downstream, as if she wished she were going too. He was too skilled with women to ask her what was wrong. He knew very well what was wrong. Loneliness and homesickness natural enough in a young woman of nearly 16 years old. He had been an exile from England for almost all his own life. He knew very well the rise and fall of yearning that comes with an unexpected scent, the change of seasons, a farewell. To invite an explanation would only trigger a flood of tears and achieve nothing. Instead, he tucked her cold little hand under his arm and said that she must see his library, which he had newly assembled at the palace, and she could borrow books to read at any time. He threw an order over his shoulder to one of his pages as he led the princess to the library and walked her round the beautiful shelves, showing her not only the classical authors and the histories that were his own interest, but also the stories of romance and heroism, which he thought more likely to divert her. She did not complain, he noticed with pleasure, and she had rubbed her eyes dry as soon as she had seen him coming towards her. She had been raised in a hard school. Isabella of Spain had been a soldier's wife and a soldier herself. She did not raise any of her girls to be self-indulgent. He thought there was not a young woman in England who could match this girl for grit. But there were shadows under the princess's blue eyes, and though she took the proffered volumes with a word of thanks, she still did not smile. "And do you like maps?" he asked her. She nodded. "Of course," she said. In my father's library we have maps of the whole world, and Cristobal Colon made him a map to show him the Americas." "Does your father have a large library?" he asked, jealous of his reputation as a scholar. Her polite hesitation before she replied told him everything. Told him that his library here, of which he had been so proud, was nothing to the learning of the Moors of Spain. "Of course my father has inherited many books. They are not all his own collection," Catalina said tactfully. "Many of them are Moorish authors, from Moorish scholars. You know that the Arabs translated the Greek authors before they were ever made into French, or Italian, or English. The Arabs had all the sciences and all the mathematics when they were forgotten in Christendom. He has all the Moorish translations of Aristotle and Sophocles and everyone." He could feel his longing for the new learning like a hunger. "He has many books?" "Thousands of volumes," she said. "Hebrew and Arabic, Latin, and all the Christian languages too. But he doesn't read them all. He has Arab scholars to study them." "And the maps?" he asked. "He is advised mostly by Arab navigators and map-makers," she said. "They travel so far overland they understand how to chart their way by the stars. The sea voyages are just the same to them as a journey through the desert. They say that a watery waste is the same as a plain of sand. They use the stars and the moon to measure their journey in both." "And does your father think that much profit will come from his discoveries?" the king asked curiously. "We have all heard of these great voyages of Cristobal Colon and the treasures he has brought back." He admired how her eyelashes swept down to hide the gleam. "Oh, I could not say." Cleverly she avoided the question. "Certainly my mother thinks that there are many souls to save for Jesus." Henry opened the great folder with his collection of maps and spread them before her. Beautifully illuminated sea monsters frolicked in the corners. He traced for her the coastline of England, the borders of the Holy Roman Empire, the handful of regions of France, the new widening borders of her own country of Spain, and the papal lands in Italy. "You see why your father and I have to be friends," he said to her. "We both face the power of France on our doorstep. We cannot even trade with each other unless we can keep France out of the narrow seas. If Juana's son inherits the Habsburg lands, then he will have 2 kingdoms," she indicated, "Spain and also the Netherlands." "And your son will have all of England, an alliance with Scotland, and all our lands in France," he said, making a sweep with his spread palm. "They will be a powerful pair of cousins." She smiled at the thought of it, and Henry saw the ambition in her. "You would like to have a son who would rule half of Christendom?" "What woman would not?" she said. "And my son and Juana's son could surely defeat the Moors, could drive them back and back beyond the Mediterranean Sea." "Or perhaps you might find a way to live in peace," he suggested. "Just because one man calls him Allah and another calls him God is no reason for believers to be enemies, surely." At once Catalina shook her head. "It will have to be a war forever, I think. My mother says that it is the great battle between good and evil which will go on until the end of time." "Then you will be in danger forever," he started, when there was a tap on the great wooden door of the library. It was the page that Henry had sent running, bringing a flustered goldsmith who had been waiting for days to show his work to the king, and was rather surprised to be summoned in a moment. "Now," Henry said to his daughter-in-law, "I have a treat for you." She looked up at him. Good God, he thought, it would be a man of stone who did not want this little flower in his bed. I swear that I could make her smile, and at any rate I would enjoy trying. "Have you?" Henry gestured to the man, who flapped out a cloth of maroon velvet from his pocket, and then spilled the contents of his knapsack onto the scarlet background. A tumble of jewels, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, pearls, chains, lockets, earrings, and brooches was swiftly spread before Catalina's widening gaze. "You shall have your pick," Henry said, his voice warm and intimate. "It is my private gift to you, to bring the smile back to your pretty face." She hardly heard him. She was at the table in a moment, the goldsmith holding up one rich item after another. Henry watched her indulgently. So she might be a princess with a pure bloodline of Castilian aristocrats, while he was the grandson of a working man. But she was a girl as easily bought as any other, and he had the means to please her. "Silver?" he asked. She turned a bright face to him. "Not silver," she said decisively. Henry remembered that this was a girl who had seen the treasure of the Incas cast at her feet. "Gold, then?" "I do prefer gold." "Pearls?" She made a little moo with her mouth. My God, she has a kissable mouth, he thought. "Not pearls?" he asked aloud. "They are not my greatest favourite," she confided. She smiled up at him. "What is your favourite stone?" "Why, she is flirting with me," he said to himself, stunned at the thought. "She is playing me like she would an indulgent uncle. She is reeling me in like a fish." "Emeralds?" She smiled again. "No, this," she said simply. She had picked out, in a moment, the most expensive thing in the jeweller's pack, a collar of deepest blue sapphires with a matching pair of earrings. Charmingly she held the collar against her smooth cheeks, so that he could look from the jewels to her eyes. She took a step closer towards him, so that he could smell the scent on her hair, orange-blossom water from the gardens of the Alhambra. She smelled as if she were an exotic flower herself. "Do they match my eyes?" she asked him. "Are my eyes as blue as sapphires?" He took a little breath, surprised at the violence of his response. "They are. You shall have them," he said, almost choking on his desire for her. "You shall have this and anything else you like. You shall name your wish." The look she threw up at him was of pure delight. "And my ladies, too?" "Call your ladies, they shall have their pick." She laughed with pleasure and ran to the door. He let her go. He did not trust himself to stay in the room without chaperones. Hastily he took himself out into the hall and met his mother, returning from hearing Mass. He kneeled, and she put her fingers on his head in her blessing. "My son?" "My lady mother." He rose to his feet. She quickly took in the flush of his face and his suppressed energy. "Has something troubled you?" "No." She sighed. "Is it the Queen? Is it Elizabeth?" she asked wearily. "Is she complaining about the Scots' marriage for Margaret again?" "No," he said. "I have not seen her today." "She will have to accustom herself," she said. "A princess cannot choose whom she marries, and when she leaves home. Elizabeth would know that if she had been properly brought up, but she was not." He gave his crooked smile. "That is hardly her fault." His mother's disdain was apparent. "No good would ever have come from her mother," she said shortly. "Bad breeding, the Woodvilles." Henry shrugged and said nothing. He never defended his wife to his mother. Her malice was so constant and so impenetrable that it was a waste of time to try to change her mind. He never defended his mother to his wife. He never had to. Queen Elizabeth never commented on her difficult mother-in-law or her demanding husband. She took him, his mother, his autocratic rule, as if they were natural hazards, as unpleasant and as inevitable as bad weather. "You should not let her disturb you," his mother said. "She has never disturbed me," he said, thinking of the princess who did. "I am certain now that the king likes me, above all his daughters, and I am so glad of it. I am used to being the favourite daughter, the baby of the family. I like it when I am favourite of the king. I like to feel special. When he saw that I was sad at my court going back to Spain and leaving me in England, he spent the afternoon with me, showing me his library, talking about his maps, and finally giving me an exquisite collar of sapphires. He let me pick out exactly what I wanted from the goldsmith's pack, and he said that the sapphires were the colour of my eyes. I did not like him very well at first, but I am becoming accustomed to his abrupt speech and his quick ways. He is a man whose word is law in this court and in this land, and he owes thanks to no one for anything, except perhaps his lady mother. He has no close friends, no intimates but her and the soldiers who fought with him, who are now the great men of his court. He is not tender to his wife, nor warm to his daughters, but I like it that he attends to me. Perhaps I will come to love him as a daughter. Already I am glad that he singles me out. In a court such as this, which revolves around his approval, it makes me feel like a princess indeed when he praises me or spends time with me. If it were not for him, then I think I would be even more lonely than I am. The prince, my husband, treats me as if I were a table or a chair. He never speaks to me, he never smiles at me, he never starts a conversation. It is all he can do to find a reply. I think I was a fool when I thought he looked like a troubadour. He looks like a milksop, and that is the truth. He never raises his voice above a whisper, he never says anything of interest. He may well speak French and Latin and half a dozen languages, but since he has nothing to say, what good are they? We live as strangers, and if he did not come to my bedchamber at night once a week as if on duty, I would not know I was married at all. I show the sapphires to his sister, the Princess Margaret, and she is eaten up with jealousy. I shall have to confess to the sin of vanity and of pride. It is not right for me to flaunt them before her, but if she had ever been kind to me by word or deed, then I would not have showed her. I want her to know that her father values me, even if she and her grandmother and her brother do not. But now all I have done is upset her and put myself in the wrong, and I will have to confess and make a penance. Worst of all, I did not behave with the dignity that a princess of Spain should always show. If she were not such a fishwife's apprentice, then I could have been better. This court dances around the king as if nothing matters more in the world than his favour, and I should know better than to join in. At the very least I should not be measuring myself against a girl 4 years younger than me, and only a princess of England, even if she calls herself Queen of Scotland at every opportunity. The young Prince and Princess of Wales finished their visit to Richmond, and started to make their own royal household in Baynard's castle. Catalina had her rooms at the back of the house, overlooking the gardens and the river, and her household, her Spanish ladies, her Spanish chaplain and duenna, and Arthur's rooms overlooked the city, with his household, his chaplain, and his tutor. They met formally only once a day for dinner, when the two households sat at opposite sides of the hall and stared at each other with mutual suspicion, more like enemies in the middle of a forced truce than members of a united home. The castle was run according to the commands of Lady Margaret, the king's mother. The feast days and fast days, the entertainments and the daily timetable were all commanded by her. Even the nights when Arthur was to visit his wife in her bedchamber had been appointed by her. She did not want the young people becoming exhausted, nor did she want them neglecting their duties. So once a week the prince's household and friends solemnly escorted him to the princess's rooms and left him there overnight. For both young people, the experience was an ordeal of embarrassment. Arthur became no more skilled. Catalina endured his silent determination as politely as she could. But then, one day in early December, Catalina's monthly course started, and she told Donna Elvira. The duenna at once told the prince's groom of the bedchamber that the prince could not come to the Infanta's bed for a week. The Infanta was indisposed. Within half an hour, everyone, from the king at Whitehall to the spit-boy at Baynard's castle, knew that the Princess of Wales was having her course, and so no child had yet been conceived. And everyone, from the king to the spit-boy, wondered, since the girl was lusty and strong, and since she was bleeding, obviously fertile, if Arthur was capable of doing his side of their duty. In the middle of December, when the court was preparing for the great 12-day feast of Christmas, Arthur was summoned by his father and ordered to prepare to leave for his castle at Ludlow. "I suppose you'll want to take your wife with you," the king said, smiling at his son in an effort to seem unconcerned. "As you wish, sir," Arthur replied carefully. "What would you wish?" After enduring a week's ban from Catalina's bed, with everyone remarking among themselves that no child had been made, but to be sure it was early days yet, and it might be nobody's fault, Arthur felt embarrassed and discouraged. He had not gone back to her bedroom, and she had sent no message to invite him. He could not expect an invitation. He knew that was ridiculous. A princess of Spain could hardly send for the Prince of England. But she had not smiled or encouraged him in any way at all. He had received no message to tell him to resume his visits, and he had no idea how long these mysteries usually took. There was no one that he could ask, and he did not know what he should do. "She does not seem very merry," Arthur observed. "She's homesick," his father said briskly. "It's up to you to divert her. Take her to Ludlow with you, buy her things. She's a girl like any other. Praise her beauty, tell her jokes, flirt with her." Arthur looked quite blank. "In Latin?" His father barked his harsh laugh. "Lad, you could do it in Welsh if your eyes are smiling and your cock is hard. She'll know what you mean, I swear it. She's a girl who knows well enough what a man means." There was no answering brightness from his son. "Yes, sir." "If you don't want her with you, you're not obliged to take her this year, you know. You were supposed to marry and then spend the first year apart." "That was when I was 14. "Only a year ago."
"Yes, but—"
"So you do want her with you?"
His son flushed. The father regarded the boy with sympathy.
"You want her, but you're afraid she will make a fool of you," he suggested.
The blonde head drooped, nodded.
"And you think if you and she are far from court and from me, then she will be able to torment you?"
Another small nod. "And all her ladies, and her duenna."
"And time will hang heavy on your hands?"
The boy looked up, his face a picture of misery.
"And she will be bored and sulky, and she will make your little court at Ludlow a miserable prison for both of you."
"If she dislikes me," he started, his voice very low. Henry rested a heavy hand on his boy's shoulder.
"Oh, my son, it doesn't matter what she thinks of you," he said. "Perhaps your mother was not my choice. Perhaps I was not hers. When a throne is involved, the heart comes in second place, if it ever matters at all. She knows what she has to do, and that is all that counts."
"Oh, she knows all about it," the boy burst out resentfully. "She has no—" His father waited.
"No what?"
"No shame at all."
Henry caught his breath.
"She is shameless? She is passionate?"
He tried to keep the desire from his voice, a sudden lascivious picture of his daughter-in-law naked and shameless in his mind.
"No, she goes at it like a man harnessing a horse," Arthur said miserably. "A task to be done."
Henry choked down a laugh. "But at least she does it," he said. "You don't have to beg her or persuade her. She knows what she has to do."
Arthur turned from him to the window and looked out of the arrow slit to the cold River Thames below. "I don't think she likes me. She only likes her Spanish friends, and Mary, and perhaps Henry. I see her laughing with them and dancing with them, as if she were very merry in their company. She chatters away with her own people. She is courteous to everyone who passes by. She has a smile for everyone. I hardly ever see her, and I don't want to see her either."
Henry dropped his hand on his son's shoulder. "My boy, she doesn't know what she thinks of you," he assured him. "She's too busy in her own little world of dresses and jewels and those damn gossipy Spanish women. The sooner you and she are alone together, the sooner you two will come to terms. You can take her with you to Ludlow, and you can get acquainted."
The boy nodded, but he did not look convinced. "If it is your wish, sire," he said formally.
"Shall I ask her if she wants to go?"
The colour flooded into the young man's cheeks. "What if she says no?" he asked anxiously.
His father laughed. "She won't," he promised. "You'll see." Henry was right. Catalina was too much of a princess to say either yes or no to a king. When he asked her if she would like to go to Ludlow with the prince, she said that she would do whatever the king wished.
"Is Lady Margaret Pole still at the castle?" she asked, her voice a little nervous.
He scowled at her. Lady Margaret was now safely married to Sir Richard Pole, one of the solid Tudor war horses, and warden of Ludlow Castle. But Lady Margaret had been born Margaret Plantagenet, beloved daughter of the Duke of Clarence, cousin to King Edward, and sister to Edward of Warwick, whose claim to the throne had been so much greater than Henry's own. "What of it?" "Nothing," she said hastily. "You have no cause to avoid her," he said gruffly. "What was done in my name, by my order. You don't bear any blame for it." She flushed as if they were talking of something shameful. "I know." "I can't have anyone challenging my right to the throne," he said abruptly. "There are too many of them, Yorks and Beauforts and Lancasters too, and endless others who fancy their chances as pretenders. You don't know this country. We're all married and intermarried like so many conies in a warren." He paused to see if she would laugh, but she was frowning, following his rapid French. "I can't have anyone claiming by their pretended right what I have won by conquest," he said. "And I won't have anyone else claiming by conquest either." "I thought you were the true king," Catalina said hesitantly. "I am now," said Henry Tudor bluntly, "and that's all that matters." "You were anointed." "I am now," repeated with a grim smile. "But you are of the royal line." "I have royal blood in my veins," he said, his voice hard. "No need to measure how much or how little. I picked up my crown off the battlefield, literally. It was at my feet in the mud. So I knew, everyone saw God give me the victory because I was his chosen king. The Archbishop anointed me because he knew that too. I am as much king as any in Christendom, and more than most, because I did not just inherit as a baby, the fruit of another man's struggle. God gave me my kingdom when I was a man. It is my just desert." "But you had to claim it." "I claimed my own," he said finally. "I won my own. God gave my own to me. That's an end of it." She bowed her head to the energy in his words. "I know, sire." Her submissiveness and the pride that was hidden behind it fascinated him. He thought that there had never been a young woman whose smooth face could hide her thoughts like this one. "Do you want to stay here with me?" Henry asked softly, knowing that he should not ask her such a thing, praying as soon as the words were out of his mouth that she would say no, and silence his secret desire for her. "Why, I wish whatever your Majesty wishes," she said coolly. "I suppose you want to be with Arthur?" he asked, daring her to deny it. "As you wish, sire," she said steadily. "Tell me, would you like to go to Ludlow with Arthur, or would you rather stay here with me?" She smiled faintly, and would not be drawn. "You are the king," she said quietly. "I must do whatever you command." Henry knew he should not keep her at court beside him, but he could not resist playing with the idea. He consulted her Spanish advisers, and found them hopelessly divided and squabbling among themselves. The Spanish ambassador, who had worked so hard to deliver the intractable marriage contract, insisted that the princess should go with her new husband, and that she should be seen to be a married woman in every way. Her confessor, who alone of all of them seemed to have a tenderness for the little princess, urged that the young couple should be allowed to stay together. Her duenna, the formidable and difficult Donna Elvira, preferred not to leave London. She had heard that Wales was 100 miles away, a mountainous and rocky land. If Catalina stayed in Baynard's castle and the household was rid of Arthur, then they would make a little Spanish enclave in the heart of the city, and the duenna's power would be unchallenged. She would rule the princess and the little Spanish court. The Queen volunteered her opinion that Catalina would find Ludlow too cold and lonely in mid-December, and suggested that perhaps the young couple could stay together in London until spring. "You just hope to keep Arthur with you, but he has to go," Henry said brusquely to her. "He has to learn the business of kingship, and there is no better way to learn to rule England than to rule the principality." "He's still young, and he is shy with her. He has to learn to be a husband, too." "They will have to learn to deal together." "Better that they learn in private, then." In the end, it was the king's mother who gave the decisive advice. "Send her," she said to her son. "We need a child off her. She won't make one on her own in London. Send her with Arthur to Ludlow." She laughed shortly. "God knows, they'll have nothing else to do there." "Elizabeth is afraid that she will be sad and lonely," the king remarked, "and Arthur is afraid that they will not deal well together." "Who cares?" his mother asked. "What difference does that make? They are married, and they have to live together and make an heir." He shot her a swift smile. "She is only just 16, he said, "and the baby of her family still missing her mother. You don't make any allowances for her youth, do you?" "I was married at 12 years old and gave birth to you in the same year," she returned. "No one made any allowances for me, and yet I survived." "I doubt you were happy." "I was not. I doubt that she is. But that surely is the last thing that matters." "Donna Elvira told me that I must refuse to go to Ludlow. Father Geraldini says that it was my duty to go with my husband. Dr. de Puebla said that for certain my mother would want me to live with my husband, to do everything to show that the marriage is complete in word and deed. Arthur, the hopeless beanpole, said nothing, and his father seems to want me to decide. But he is a king, and I don't trust him. All I really want to do is go home to Spain. Whether we are in London or whether we live in Ludlow, it will be cold, and it will rain all the time. The very air feels wet. I cannot get anything good to eat, and I cannot understand a word anybody says. I know I am Princess of Wales, and I will be Queen of England. That is true, and it will be true. But this day, I cannot feel very glad about it." "We are to go to my castle at Ludlow," Arthur remarked awkwardly to Catalina. They were seated side by side at dinner, the hall below them, the gallery above, and the wide doors crowded with people who had come from the city for the free entertainment of watching the court dine. Most people were observing the Prince of Wales and his young bride. She bowed her head, but did not look at him. "Is it your father's command?" she asked. "Yes." "Then I shall be happy to go," she said. "We will be alone, but for the warden of the castle and his wife," Arthur went on. He wanted to say that he hoped she would not mind, that he hoped she would not be bored, or sad, or, worst of all, angry with him. She looked at him without a smile. "And so?" "I hope you will be content," he stumbled. "Whatever your father wishes," she said steadily, as if to remind him that they were merely prince and princess and had no rights and no power at all. He cleared his throat. "I shall come to your room tonight," he asserted. She gave him a look from eyes as blue and hard as the sapphires around her neck. "Whatever you wish," she said in the same neutral tone. He came when she was in bed, and Donna Elvira admitted him to the room, her face like a stone, disapproval in every gesture. Catalina sat up in bed and watched as his groom of the bedchamber took his gown from his shoulders and went quietly out, closing the door behind him. "Wine?" Arthur asked. He was afraid his voice quavered slightly. "No, thank you," she said. Awkwardly the young man came to the bed, turned back the sheets, got in beside her. She turned to look at him, and he knew he was blushing beneath her inquiring gaze. He blew out the candle, so she could not see his discomfort. A little torchlight from the guard outside flickered through the slats of the shutters, and then was gone as the guard moved on. Arthur felt the bed move as she lay back and pulled her nightdress out of the way. He felt as if he were a thing to her, an object of no importance, something she had to endure in order to be Queen of England. He threw back the covers and jumped from the bed. "I'm not staying here. I'm going to my room," he said tersely. "What?" "I shan't stay here. I'm not wanted." "Not wanted? I never said you were not. It is obvious, the way you look." "It's pitch black. How do you know how I look? And anyway, You look as if someone forced you here." "I? It isn't me who sent a message that half the court heard that I was not to come to your bed." He heard her gasp. "I did not say you were not to come. I had to tell them to tell you—" She broke off in embarrassment. "It was my time. You had to know. Your duenna told my steward that I was not to come to your bed. How do you think that made me feel? How do you think that looked to everyone?" "How else was I to tell you?" she demanded. "Tell me yourself," he raged. "Don't tell everyone else in the world." "Oh, how could I? How could I say such a thing? I should be so embarrassed. Instead, it is me who is made to look a fool." Catalina slipped out of bed and steadied herself, holding the tall carved bedpost. "My lord, I apologize if I have offended you. I don't know how such things are done here. In future, I will do as you wish." He said nothing. She waited. "I'm going," he said, and went to hammer on the door for his groom to come to him. "Don't!" The cry was forced out of her. "What?" He turned. "Everyone will know," she said desperately. "Know that there is something wrong between us. Everyone will know that you have just come to me. If you leave at once, everyone will think—" "I won't stay here!" he shouted. Her pride rushed up. "You will shame us both," she cried out. "What do you want people to think? That I disgust you, or that you are impotent? Why not, if both are true?" He hammered on the door even louder. She gasped in horror and fell back against the bedpost. "Your Grace?" came a shout from the outer chamber, and the door opened to reveal the groom of the bedchamber and a couple of pages, and behind them Donna Elvira and a lady-in-waiting. Catalina stalked over to the window and turned her back to the room. Uncertainly, Arthur hesitated, glancing back at her for help, for some indication that he could stay after all. "For shame!" Donna Elvira exclaimed, pushing past Arthur and running to throw a gown around Catalina's shoulders. Once the woman was standing with her arm around Catalina, glaring at him, Arthur could not return to his bride. He stepped over the threshold and went to his own rooms. "I cannot bear him. I cannot bear this country. I cannot live here for the rest of my life. That he should say that I disgust him. That he should dare to speak to me so. Has he run mad like one of their filthy dogs that pant everywhere? Has he forgotten who I am? Has he forgotten himself? I am so furious with him. I should like to take a scimitar and slice his stupid head off. If he thought for a moment, he would have known that everyone in the palace, everyone in London, probably everyone in this gross country will laugh at us. They will say I am ugly and that I cannot please him. I am crying with temper. It's not grief. I tuck my head into the pillow of my bed so that no one can hear me and tell everyone else that the princess cried herself to sleep because her husband would not bed her. I am choking on tears and temper. I am so angry with him. After a little while I stop. I wipe my face. I sit up. I am a princess, by birth and by marriage. I should not give way. I shall have some dignity, even if he has none. He is a young man, a young Englishman at that. How should he know how to behave? I think of my home, in the moonlight, of how the walls and the tracery gleam white and the yellow stone is bleached to cream. That is a palace, where people know how to behave with grace and dignity. I wish with all my heart that I was still there. I remember that I used to watch a big yellow moon reflected in the water of the Sultana's garden. Like a fool, I used to dream of being married. Oxford, Christmas, 1501. They set off a few days before Christmas. Resolutely they spoke to each other in public with utter courtesy, and ignored each other completely when no one was watching. The Queen had asked that they might at least stay for the 12-day feast, but my lady the King's mother had ruled that they should take their Christmas at Oxford. It would give the country a chance to see the Prince and the new Princess of Wales, and what the King's mother said was law. Catalina travelled by litter, jolted mercilessly over the frozen roads, her mules foundering in the fords, chilled to the bone, however many rugs and furs they packed around her. The King's mother had ruled that she should not ride for fear of a fall. The unspoken hope was that Catalina was carrying a child. Catalina herself said nothing to confirm or deny the hope. Arthur was silence itself. They had separate rooms on the road to Oxford, and separate rooms at Magdalen College when they arrived. The choristers were ready, the kitchens were ready, the extraordinarily rich hospitality of Oxford was ready to make merry. But the Prince and Princess of Wales were as cold and as dull as the weather. They dined together, seated at the great table facing down the hall, and as many of the citizens of Oxford who could get into the gallery took their seats and watched the Princess put small morsels of food in her mouth and turn her shoulder to her husband, while he looked around the hall for companions and conversation as if he were dining alone. They brought in dancers and tumblers, mummers and players. The Princess smiled very pleasantly, but never laughed, gave small purses of Spanish coins to all the entertainers, thanked them for their attendance, but never once turned to her husband to ask him if he was enjoying the evening. The Prince walked around the room, affable and pleasant to the great men of the city. He spoke in English all the time, and his Spanish-speaking bride had to wait for someone to talk to her in French or Latin, if they would. Instead, they clustered around the Prince and chatted and joked and laughed, almost as if they were laughing at her, and did not want her to understand the jest. The Princess sat alone, stiffly, on her hard carved wooden chair, her head held high, and a small defiant smile on her lips. At last it was midnight, and the long evening could end. Catalina rose from her seat and watched the court sink into bows and curtsies. She dropped a low Spanish curtsy to her husband, her duenna behind her with a face like flint. "I bid you good night, your Grace," said the Princess in Latin, her voice clear, her accent perfect. "I shall come to your room," he said. There was a little murmur of approval. The court wanted a lusty prince. The colour rose in her cheeks at the very public announcement. There was nothing she could say. She could not refuse him, but the way she rose and left the room did not promise him a warm welcome when they were alone. Her ladies dipped their curtsies and followed her, in a little offended flurry, swishing off like a many-coloured veil trailing behind her. The court smiled behind their hands at the high spirits of the bride. Arthur came to her half an hour later, fired up by drink and resentment. He found her still dressed, waiting by the fire, her duenna at her side, the room ablaze with candles, her ladies still talking and playing cards as if it were the middle of the afternoon. Clearly she was not a young woman on her way to bed. "Sire, good evening," she said, and rose and curtsied as he entered. Arthur had to check his backward step, in retreat at the first encounter. He was ready for bed, in his nightgown with only a robe thrown over his shoulders. He was acutely aware of his bare feet and vulnerable toes. Catalina blazed in her evening finery. The ladies all turned and looked at him, their faces unfriendly. He was acutely conscious of his nightgown and his bare legs, and a chuckle of barely suppressed laughter from one of his men behind him. "I expected you to be in bed," he said. "Of course I can go to bed," she returned with glacial courtesy. "I was about to go to bed. It is very late. But when you announced so publicly that you would visit me in my rooms, I thought you must be planning to bring all the court with you. I thought you were telling everyone to come to my rooms. Why else announce it at the top of your voice, so that everybody could hear?" "I did not announce it at the top of my voice." She raised an eyebrow in wordless contradiction. "I shall stay the night," he said stubbornly. He marched to her bedroom door. "These ladies can go to their beds. It is late." He nodded to his men. "Leave us." He went into her room and closed the door behind him. She followed him, and closed the door behind her, shutting out the bright, scandalized faces of the ladies. Her back to the door, she watched him throw off his robe and nightgown, so he was naked, and climb into her bed. He plumped up the pillows and leaned back, his arms crossed against his narrow bare chest, like a man awaiting an entertainment. It was her turn to be discomforted. "Your Grace." "You had better get undressed," he taunted her. "As you say, it's very late." She turned one way and then the other. "I shall send for Donna Elvira." "Do. And send for whoever else undresses you. Don't mind me, please." Catalina bit her lip. He could see her uncertainty. She could not bear to be stripped naked in front of him. She turned and went out of the bedchamber. There was a rattle of irritable Spanish from the room next door. Arthur grinned. He guessed that she was clearing the room of her ladies and undressing out there. When she came back, he saw that he was right. She was wearing a white gown trimmed with exquisite lace, and her hair was in a long plait down her back. She looked more like a little girl than the haughty princess she had been only moments before, and he felt his desire rise up with some other feeling, a tenderness. She glanced at him, her face unfriendly. "I will have to say my prayers," she said. She went to the prie-dieu and kneeled before it. He watched her bow her head over her clasped hands and start to whisper. For the first time his irritation left him, and he thought how hard it must be for her. Surely his unease and fear must be nothing to hers. Alone in a strange land, at the beck and call of a boy a few months younger than her, with no real friends and no family, far away from everything and everyone she knew. The bed was warm. The wine he had drunk to give him courage now made him feel sleepy. He leaned back on the pillow. Her prayers were taking a long time, but it was good for a man to have a spiritual wife. He closed his eyes on the thought. When she came to bed, he thought he would take her with confidence, but with gentleness. It was Christmas, he should be kind to her. She was probably lonely and afraid. He should be generous. He thought warmly of how loving he would be to her, and how grateful she would be. Perhaps they would learn to give each other pleasure. Perhaps he would make her happy. His breathing deepened. He gave a tiny little snuffling snore. He slept. Catalina looked around from her prayers and smiled in pure triumph. Then, absolutely silently, she crept into bed beside him, and, carefully arranging herself so that not even the hem of her nightgown could touch him, she composed herself for sleep. "You thought to embarrass me before my women, before all the court. You thought you could shame me and triumph over me. But I am a princess of Spain, and I have known things and seen things that you, in this safe little country, in this smug little haven, would never dream of. I am the Infanta. I am the daughter of the two most powerful monarchs in the whole of Christendom, who alone have defeated the greatest threat ever to march against it. For 700 years the Moors have occupied Spain, an empire mightier than that of the Romans. And who drove them out? My mother, my father. So you needn't think I am afraid of you, you rose-petal prince or whatever they call you. I shall never stoop to do anything that a princess of Spain should not do. I shall never be petty or spiteful. But if you challenge me, I shall defeat you." Arthur did not speak to her in the morning. His boy's high pride was utterly cut to the quick. She had shamed him at his father's court by denying him her rooms, and now she had shamed him in private. He felt that she had trapped him, made a fool of him, and was even now laughing at him. He rose up and went out in sullen silence. He went to Mass and did not meet her eyes. He went hunting and was gone all day. He did not speak to her at night. They watched a play seated side by side, and not one word was exchanged all evening. A whole week they stayed at Oxford, and they did not say more than a dozen words to each other every day. He swore a private, bitter oath to himself that he would never, ever speak to her again. He would get a child on her, if he could. He would humiliate her in every way that he could.
but he would never say one direct word to her, and he would never, never, never sleep again in her bed. When the morning came for them to move on to Ludlow, the sky was grey with clouds, fat-bellied with snow. Catalina came out of the doorway of the college and recoiled as the icy damp air hit her in the face. Arthur ignored her. She stepped out into the yard where the train was all drawn up and waiting for her. She hesitated before the litter. It struck him that she was like a prisoner, hesitating before a cart. She could not choose. "Will it not be very cold?" she asked. He turned a hard face to her. "You will have to get used to the cold. You're not in Spain now." "So I see." She drew back the curtains of the litter. Inside there were rugs for her to wrap around herself and cushions for her to rest on, but it did not look very cosy. "It gets far worse than this," he said cheerfully. "Far colder. It rains or sleets or snows, and it gets darker. In February we have only a couple of hours of daylight at best, and then there are the freezing fogs which turn day into night, so it is forever grey." She turned and looked up at him. "Could we not set out another day?" "You agreed to come," he taunted her. "I would have been happy to leave you at Greenwich." "I did as I was told." "So here we are, travelling on as we've been ordered to do." "At least you can move about and keep warm," she said plaintively. "Can I not ride?" "My lady the king's mother said you could not." She made a little face, but she did not argue. "It's your choice. Shall I leave you here?" he asked briskly, as if he had little time for these uncertainties. "No," she said, "of course not," and climbed into the litter and pulled the rugs over her feet and up around her shoulders. Arthur led the way out of Oxford, bowing and smiling to the people who had turned out to cheer him. Catalina drew the curtains of her litter against the cold wind and the curious stares, and would not show her face. They stopped for dinner at a great house on the way, and Arthur went in to dine without even waiting to help her from the litter. The lady of the house, flustered, went out to the litter and found Catalina stumbling out, white-faced, with red eyes. "Princess, are you all right?" the woman asked her. "I am cold," Catalina said miserably. "I am freezing cold. I think I've never been so cold." She hardly ate any dinner. They could not make her take any wine. She looked ready to drop with exhaustion. But as soon as they had eaten, Arthur wanted to push on. They had 20 more miles to go before the early dusk of winter. "Can't you refuse?" Maria de Salinas asked her in a quick whisper. "No," the princess said. She rose from her seat without another word. But when they opened the great wooden door to go out into the courtyard, small flakes of snow swirled in around them. "We cannot travel in this. It will soon be dark, and we shall lose the road," Catalina exclaimed. "I shall not lose the road," Arthur said, and strode out to his horse. "You shall follow me." The lady of the house sent a servant flying for a heated stone to put in the litter at Catalina's feet. The princess climbed in, hunched the rugs around her shoulders, and tucked her hands in deep. "I am sure that he is impatient to get you to Ludlow to show you his castle," the woman said, trying to put the best aspect on a miserable situation. "He is impatient to show me nothing but neglect," Catalina snapped, but she took care to say it in Spanish. They left the warmth and lights of the great house, and heard the doors bang behind them as they turned the horses' heads to the west, and to the white sun which was sinking low on the horizon. It was 2 hours past noon, but the sky was so filled with snow clouds that there was an eerie grey glow over the rolling landscape. The road snaked ahead of them, brown tracks against brown fields, both of them bleaching to whiteness under the haze of swirling snow. Arthur rode ahead, singing merrily. Catalina's litter laboured along behind. At every step the mules threw the litter to one side and then the other. She had to keep a hand on the edge to hold herself in place, and her fingers became chilled and then cramped, blue from cold. The curtains kept out the worst of the snowflakes, but not the insistent, penetrating draughts. If she drew back a corner to look out at the country, she saw a whirl of whiteness as the snowflakes danced and circled the road, the sky seeming greyer every moment. The sun set white in a white sky, and the